I found them 3 days before my finals. Not where I'd left them, carefully organised in my desk drawer, colour-coded tabs marking every chapter I'd need. No. They were crumpled at the bottom of the trash bin in my sister's room, coffee-stained and torn. Weeks of work reduced to garbage she'd hidden beneath yesterday's takeout containers. My hand shook as I smoothed out what remained. Organic chemistry, constitutional law, statistical methods. Every page I'd painstakingly created, every diagram I'd redrawn until it made sense, every formula I'd memorized through repetition, destroyed. The edges were burnt. She tried to destroy them completely, then changed her mind, settling for making them useless instead. "Clara?" My mother's voice drifted up the stairs. "Dinner's ready. Tell your sister too." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed around words that felt too big, too sharp, too final to speak aloud. Emma's laughter echoed from downstairs, light and careless, the same laugh she'd given me yesterday when I'd asked if she'd seen my notes. "Why would I touch your boring stuff?" she'd said, rolling her eyes. "I have my own life, you know." My own life. As if I didn't. As if the past 4 years hadn't been me clawing my way through a degree everyone said I couldn't handle, while she breezed through her arts program with their money, their attention, their pride. I sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by the ruins of my future, and felt something inside me crack. Not break. Breaking would have been louder, more dramatic. This was quieter. A hairline fracture spreading through everything I'd built, everything I'd believed about family and fairness and working hard enough to matter. The acceptance letter was still in my bag. Graduate program, full scholarship, contingent on graduating with honours. I needed these finals. I needed to pass them with grades that proved I belonged in those classrooms, that I deserved that scholarship, that I was more than the daughter they'd stopped believing in. But Emma had made sure I wouldn't. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, quick and light. She appeared in her doorway, saw me sitting there with her trash bin pulled close, and her face did something interesting. Not guilt, I'd stopped expecting that years ago. Surprise, maybe. Calculation, the quick mental adjustment of someone caught but not quite cornered. "Oh," she said, "you found those." Not an apology, not even an excuse. Just acknowledgement, flat and simple, like I'd discovered she'd borrowed my sweater. "Why?" The word came out steady, which surprised me. Everything inside felt molten, but my voice stayed level. She shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "You were getting cocky. Mum and Dad kept talking about your finals, like they actually mattered, like you were doing something impressive. It was annoying. So you destroyed my work." "I didn't destroy them. They're right there." She gestured at the coffee-stained pages in my lap. "A little damaged, maybe? But you're smart, right? You can remake them. You have 3 days." 3 days. 12 courses worth of notes. Hundreds of hours of synthesis and organisation. Gone because I was getting cocky. Because I'd made the mistake of mattering for a moment in a house where only she was supposed to shine. "I won't tell them," she added, like she was doing me a favour. "But maybe this will teach you not to act like you're better than everyone else." She left, just walked away, her footsteps light down the stairs, her laughter joining our parents' voices in the kitchen. Dinner, smells drifted up. Roast chicken, Emma's favourite. And I heard my father ask about her gallery showing next week. Heard my mother gush about the painting Emma had finished. No one called for me again. I stayed on that floor until the light changed, until dinner was over and the house settled into its evening rhythms. I stayed until the shaking stopped, until the anger crystallised into something colder, something that felt less like emotion and more like understanding. She'd done this before, smaller things, easier to dismiss. My scholarship application that went missing, my recommendation letter that arrived late because someone had buried it under mail, my textbooks that disappeared right before midterms, only to resurface a week later in places I'd overlooked. I'd convinced myself it was carelessness, coincidence, normal sibling friction in a house where resources were limited and attention even more scarce. But this wasn't careless. This was deliberate, calculated. This was my sister looking at my success and deciding it took something away from her, deciding that the only way she could shine was if I stayed dim. I gathered the ruined notes carefully, every torn page, every burnt edge. I carried them to my room and spread them across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. Then I opened my laptop. 3 days, 72 hours. It was impossible, but impossible only mattered if you expected to survive what came next. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I didn't eat unless someone put food directly in front of me. I became a machine, rebuilding from memory what I'd spent months creating, my hands moving across keyboard and paper with mechanical precision. My mother knocked once, asked if I was okay. I said yes. She believed me because it was easier than investigating, easier than seeing what she had trained herself not to see for years. Emma walked past my room several times, always slowing, always glancing in, checking, maybe, to see if I'd broken yet, to see if I'd cry or rage or beg for her mercy. I didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her presence. I just kept working, kept reconstructing what she'd destroyed, kept moving forward with the kind of focus that comes from having nothing left to lose. I finished the notes at 4 a.m, 6 hours before my first final. My eyes burned, my hands cramped, my head felt stuffed with cotton and concrete, but the notes were complete. Not perfect, not as good as the originals, but good enough. I took my first exam in a daze. Constitutional law, 3 hours of essay questions that blurred together into a wall of text my exhausted brain somehow decoded. I wrote. I quoted precedents. I synthesized arguments. Then I went home and slept for 4 hours before the next one. Statistical methods, organic chemistry, economic theory. One after another, 3 days of walking into exam rooms on no sleep and shredded nerves, sitting down, and somehow, pulling answers from the wreckage of my preparation. I passed. Not just passed, I held my grades, kept my honours standing, secured my scholarship. When the results posted, I was in the kitchen making coffee. My mother saw them first, pulled them up on her phone, made a surprised sound. "Clara," she called, "your grades are up. You did well." Well, such a careful word. Not amazing or incredible or any of the superlatives she'd used last month when Emma got an honourable mention in a local art show. Just well. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face carefully neutral. "Congratulations," she said, and I heard the question underneath it. How? How did you manage it? How did you survive what I did to you? I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no triumph, just a vast, quiet emptiness where my love for her used to be. "Thank you," I said, and went back to my coffee. That night, I had the dream for the first time. I was back in her room, finding the notes, feeling that crack spread through my chest. But this time, when the crack widened, I didn't just feel it break. I felt myself fall through it, down and down into darkness that felt less like falling and more like sinking, like drowning in something thick and cold. I woke up gasping, my heart racing, my sheets soaked with sweat. It was just a dream, I told myself. Just stress. Just my brain processing trauma in the way brains do. But the dreams kept coming. Every night for a week, I'd find myself back in that moment, falling through that crack, drowning in that darkness. And every night, I'd wake up feeling more tired than when I'd gone to sleep, like I was actually drowning, actually dying, actually letting that moment consume me from the inside out. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday. My parents came, sat 3 rows back, clapped politely when my name was called. Emma didn't come. She had a migraine, they said, couldn't make it. I walked across that stage in my cap and gown, shook hands with the dean, accepted my diploma with honours distinction clearly printed on the certificate. I smiled for the camera. I posed with my parents afterward for a photo they'd frame but never hang, and I felt nothing. No pride, no relief, no satisfaction, just that same vast emptiness, spreading wider, swallowing everything that used to matter. The graduate programme started in the fall. I had 3 months. I spent them working 2 jobs, saving money for an apartment near campus, preparing to leave the house I'd grown up in and never fully belonged to. Emma noticed the boxes. She stood in my doorway one afternoon in July, watching me pack books, her face uncertain for the first time in years. "You're really leaving," she said. "Yes. Because of me." I looked at her, really looked at her, saw my younger sister, the girl I'd protected from bullies in middle school, the girl I'd helped with her college applications, the girl I'd loved reflexively because that's what older sisters did. And I saw the woman who'd destroyed my work to dim my light, who'd sabotaged me repeatedly and called it teaching me lessons, who'd looked at my success like it was theft, like I'd stolen something that belonged exclusively to her. "No," I said, "because of me." She left. I kept packing. The dreams got worse. Every night, that same moment, that same crack, that same fall. But now I fell further, deeper, until the darkness swallowed me completely, and I stopped fighting, stopped struggling, just let it take me under. I woke up one morning and couldn't remember falling asleep, couldn't remember the night before at all. There was just the darkness, and then there was my alarm, and between them was nothing. I got up anyway, made coffee, started my day, ignored the way my hands shook, the way my reflection looked unfamiliar, the way the morning light seemed dimmer than it should. At my afternoon shift, retail, mind-numbing, perfectly temporary, I felt it happen. That crack. The real one, not the dream. It spread through my chest and widened, and I fell, right there between the clothing racks and the fluorescent lights, fell down into the darkness I'd been dreaming for weeks. I heard someone scream, heard my manager calling 911, heard the way sound goes distant and muffled when you're underwater, when you're drowning, when you're dying. And then I heard nothing. The silence was different than sleep. It was complete, total. The kind of nothing that doesn't exist in life because living things make noise, always, even in stillness. Hearts beat, lungs expand, blood moves. This was absence, pure and absolute. I floated in it, formless and calm, thinking, this is death, and feeling surprised by how peaceful it was, how gentle, how much it felt like utterly being allowed to rest. And then light, not gradual, not soft, light like a curtain ripped away, and with it, sound, voices, movement, the scratch of pen on paper, the hum of air conditioning, all of it rushing in at once, overwhelming and immediate. I gasped and jerked upright. I was at a desk. My desk. The one in my childhood bedroom, the one I'd sold before moving out. Sunlight streamed through the window at an angle that meant early afternoon. My laptop was open in front of me, screen showing a document I recognised. Organic chemistry notes. The good ones. The originals, complete and perfect. The ones I'd spent 3 months creating. The ones Emma would destroy in 2 weeks. My hands were younger. My body felt different, lighter, less tired, less worn down by years of overwork and underfunding. I grabbed my phone, checked the date. 4 years earlier. Junior year. 2 weeks before finals, 3 years before graduation. 4 years before I fell down between those clothing racks and drowned in darkness that turned out to be not death, but reset, rebirth. The word came to me with complete certainty, with calm understanding that shouldn't have been possible, but was. I'd died from exhaustion, from heartbreak, from the slow accumulation of damage that happens when you survive instead of live. And somehow, impossibly, I'd been given another chance. I sat very still, breathing carefully, feeling my younger heart beat in my younger chest. I waited for panic or disbelief or any of the reactions that should come from discovering you've travelled backward through time. Instead, I felt relief, because I knew exactly what was coming. I knew every betrayal, every moment of favouritism, every time I'd be overlooked or dismissed or sabotaged. I knew the tests waiting for me, the challenges I'd barely survived. And this time, I knew how to pass them without breaking myself in the process. The door to my room opened. Emma, 17 years old, looked exactly as I remembered. Pretty and bright and thoughtlessly cruel in the way teenagers are when they've never been told no. "Mum wants you to help me with my college essay," she said, not asking, already assuming I'd comply. I looked at her. My younger sister, not yet the woman who'd destroy my notes, but already the girl who'd learned she could take from me without consequence, already walking the path that would lead her to that trash bin, that betrayal, that moment that would eventually kill me. "No," I said. She blinked. "What?" I said, "No, I'm studying. Ask Dad." "But you're better at writing. Then you'll improve by practicing yourself." I turned back to my laptop, dismissing her, my voice steady and uninflected. Not angry, not emotional, just certain. She stood there for a moment, confused by this version of her sister, who didn't automatically sacrifice for her comfort. Then she huffed and left, footsteps loud on the stairs as she went to complain to our parents. I waited for the guilt. It didn't come. There was just clarity, cold and clean, the kind of understanding that comes from watching yourself die because you gave too much to people who valued you too little. Over dinner that night, my mother brought it up. "Emma says you wouldn't help her with her essay." "I'm studying," I said. "Finals are in 2 weeks." "But you always help her." "I know." I met her eyes. "But this time, I need to focus on my own work. She's capable of writing her own essay." My father frowned. "You're being selfish, Clara. Family helps family." I could have argued, could have pointed out that I'd been helping for years while no one helped me, that Emma was perfectly capable, but had learned helplessness because I'd enabled it. That family helps family only seemed to flow one direction in this house. Instead, I just said, "Maybe," and went back to eating. The conversation moved on. They discussed Emma's upcoming art show, a school exhibition, nothing major, but they talked about it like it was the Met. I listened and said nothing, conserving my energy for battles that mattered. Later, Emma cornered me in the hallway. "Why are you being weird?" "I'm not being weird, I'm being busy. You've never been too busy to help me before." I looked at her. This girl who didn't yet know what she'd become, what she'd do, how far she'd go to keep me small. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. "Things change," I said, and went to my room. That night I consolidated my notes, made backup copies, uploaded them to 3 different cloud services, printed physical copies I stored in a locked box I'd buy tomorrow. Then I did something I'd never done in my first life. I made a study plan that didn't include exhausting myself for others. 3 hours a day, regular sleep, actual meals, time for myself that wasn't borrowed from Emma's needs or my parents' expectations. It felt revolutionary. The 2 weeks passed differently than before. Emma asked for help 3 more times. I refused each time, gently but firmly. My mother made comments about me pulling away from the family. My father suggested I was going through a phase. I let them think what they wanted. I studied, I slept, I kept my notes secure. The day Emma had stolen them in my previous life, I came home from class to find her in my room, going through my desk. She froze when she saw me, guilt flashing across her face before settling into defiance. "I was looking for a stapler," she said. "The stapler's in the kitchen." I stayed in the doorway, calm and watchful. "What are you really looking for?" She bristled. "Why are you being so paranoid? God, Clara, not everything is about you." "You're right," I said. "Not everything is, but this is my room, and those are my things, and you need to leave." We stared at each other. In that moment, I saw her decide, saw her weigh whether pushing back was worth the confrontation, whether she could win this particular battle. She couldn't, not anymore, because I wasn't the sister who'd bent to avoid conflict, who'd sacrificed for peace. I was the sister who died from giving too much and been given a second chance to give nothing at all. She left, slammed the door, complained loudly to our parents downstairs about my attitude problem. I locked my door and went back to studying. Finals came and went. I took each exam well-rested, well-prepared, confident, in ways I'd never been before. Not because I was smarter this time. I wasn't. But because I wasn't broken, wasn't running on 3 days of no sleep and shredded nerves, wasn't fighting to prove something to people who'd already decided I was less. My grades posted. Straight A's, perfect GPA, honours standing secured not through survival, but through actual competence. My parents saw them and said, "That's nice, sweetie." My mother added, "But don't let it make you arrogant." Emma saw them and said nothing. But I caught her watching me sometimes, confusion and something else. Resentment, maybe, or fear flickering across her face. She'd expected me to fail, had maybe even taken steps to ensure it, steps I'd thwarted by refusing to make myself vulnerable. And now, she didn't know what to do with a sister who wouldn't play the role she'd been assigned. Summer came. I got the same retail job I'd worked before, but this time, I didn't take a second job. I worked reasonable hours, saved money efficiently, spent my free time actually free instead of perpetually recovering from exhaustion. Emma's behaviour shifted. She became needier, more demanding, following me around the house asking questions about my plans, my classes, my future. Not because she cared, because she needed to understand what had changed, needed to figure out how to reassert control. I gave her nothing. Not coldness, not cruelty, just consistent, polite distance. The kind of relationship you maintain with acquaintances, not sisters. The kind that requires nothing of you beyond basic civility. She hated it. "Why are you being like this?" she finally asked one August afternoon, finding me in the backyard reading. "Like what?" "Like you don't care. Like we're strangers." I marked my page and looked at her. Really looked at her, this girl who would have destroyed me if I'd let her, who would have stolen my future and called it teaching me lessons. "We're not strangers," I said carefully. "We're just not as close as we used to be." "But why? What did I do?" The question was so absurd I almost laughed. What did she do? Everything, nothing, things that hadn't happened yet in this timeline, but had shaped every decision I'd made since waking up in my younger body. But I couldn't explain that. Couldn't tell her about the notes she'd destroy that didn't exist yet, about the sister she'd become that she wasn't yet, about the death she'd contributed to that hadn't happened. So I just said, "You didn't do anything. I'm just changing, growing up. It happens." She stared at me, frustrated and confused, wanting something from me I wouldn't give. Then she turned and left, and I went back to my book. Senior year was different. I took the same classes, sat in the same rooms, learned the same material, but I did it alone, without the weight of family obligations and sister duties pulling me down. I stopped going home on weekends, stopped answering every text immediately, stopped making myself available for Emma's crises and my parents' expectations. They noticed. My mother called it pulling away. My father called it getting too independent. Emma called it betrayal, though not to my face. I called it survival. The graduate program acceptance came in March, same as before. Full scholarship, same as before. The difference was that this time, I didn't need to barely scrape by to earn it. I'd earned it through competence, through rest, through refusing to break myself for people who wouldn't notice the breaking. Emma found out when my mother mentioned it at dinner, pride finally creeping into her voice. Clara got into graduate school, full scholarship. Emma's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Oh," she said, "that's ads." Great. But her face said otherwise. Her face said, how? How did you do this without me sabotaging you? How did you succeed when I was supposed to be the successful one? I smiled at her, calm and serene. Thank you. She excused herself from dinner early. I heard her crying in her room later, heard my mother going to comfort her, heard the murmured conversation about how hard it must be to see her sister doing so well. Hard, as if my success took something from her, as if there wasn't enough achievement to go around, as if we were competing for finite resources of pride and attention. Maybe we were. Maybe in this family there had only ever been enough love for one daughter to shine, and Emma had learned young how to hoard it all. But I'd learnt something too. I didn't need their light. I'd learnt to burn on my own. Graduation came. The same ceremony, the same stage, the same diploma. But this time, when I walked across that stage, I felt it. Pride, satisfaction, the deep certainty of having earned something real. My parents clapped. Emma was there this time, sitting with them, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes tracking my every move. After, during the reception, she pulled me aside. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Okay." She looked around, making sure no one was listening. "I know what you're doing." "What am I doing?" "You're punishing me for something. I don't know what, but you're freezing me out on purpose." I considered this, considered telling her the truth about the notes, about the death, about the second chance I'd used to save myself from her, considered explaining that this wasn't punishment, just self-preservation. But what would be the point? She wasn't ready to hear it, might never be ready. Some people never understood how their small cruelties compounded into catastrophe. "I'm not punishing you," I said instead. "I'm just living my life. You should try doing the same." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you spend a lot of time worried about what I'm doing, how I'm succeeding, whether I'm paying enough attention to you. Maybe focus on your own path instead of watching mine." Her face flushed. "I don't." "You do." I kept my voice gentle, not cruel, factual. "You always have. And it's exhausting for both of us." I left her there, standing in the reception hall, and went to take photos with my professors. The ones who'd actually noticed my work, actually cared about my success. That night, I had the dream again for the first time in months. The crack, the fall, the darkness. But this time, when I fell, I didn't drown. I floated, suspended in that darkness, calm and unafraid, letting it hold me instead of pull me under. I woke up and understood. I wasn't running from that death anymore. I'd faced it, learned from it, used it to build something better. Moving out took 3 days. I'd found an apartment near campus. Small, but mine, a space Emma had never touched and my parents couldn't fill with their expectations. Emma watched me pack, hovering in doorways, asking questions I half answered. She wanted something, closure maybe, or understanding, or permission to stop feeling guilty about things she didn't remember doing. On my last night, she knocked on my door. I opened it to find her crying. "I don't want you to go," she said. "I know. It feels like you hate me." I looked at her, this sister who'd tried to destroy me and didn't even know it, who'd sabotaged me repeatedly across a timeline only I remembered. And I felt something unexpected. Forgiveness. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from understanding. She'd been raised in the same house I had, taught the same lessons about who mattered and who didn't. She'd learned to hoard love because she'd seen what happened to people who didn't fight for it. They got ignored, overlooked, dismissed. She'd learned to dim my light because no one had taught her that lights don't work like that someone else's shine doesn't steal from your own. "I don't hate you," I said, and meant it, "but I can't keep sacrificing myself for your comfort. I tried that once. It killed me." "What?" "Never mind." I pulled her into a hug, brief and careful. "Take care of yourself, Emma. Actually, take care of your dreams, your art, your future. Stop measuring yourself against me and just be yourself." She pulled back, confused and tearful. "That's what I've been trying to do." "No," I said gently. "You've been trying to make sure I don't do better than you. That's different." I closed the door before she could respond. The drive to my new apartment took 40 minutes. I made it in silence, windows down, late summer air washing through the car. I carried my boxes upstairs alone, declined my parents' offer to help, set up my space exactly how I wanted it. That night, in my own bed, in my own place, I slept better than I had in years. Both years, the first life and the second. Graduate school was hard but manageable. The classes challenged me without breaking me. The workload was heavy but sustainable. I made friends, real ones, people who liked me for reasons that had nothing to do with what I could give them. I called home once a week, kept the conversations brief and polite. My mother tried to guilt me into visiting more often. I declined without explanation. Emma texted, sometimes, pictures of her artwork, updates about her life, and I responded with supportive but distant messages. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't cold. I was just not available for the role I'd been assigned, the one where I made myself small so she could feel big. 6 months into my program, Emma called. Not texted, called, which meant she needed something or wanted to say something she couldn't write. "Hey," I answered. "I figured it out," she said without preamble. "Figured what out?" "Why you changed, why you're different." I waited. "I sabotaged you," she said quietly. "I don't remember doing it. I remember being jealous. Remember wanting Mum and Dad to notice me more. Remember feeling like you were getting too much attention. But I sabotaged you. Probably multiple times, probably in ways I didn't even realize were sabotage." My heart beat steady in my chest. "What makes you think that?" "Because I would have. Because I can look back now and see how I was, how I thought, how scared I was, that you'd be better than me at everything, and I know what I'm capable of when I'm scared." "Okay," I said. "That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me I'm wrong, or that you forgive me, or that we can fix this." Her voice cracked. "I want my sister back." I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights, feeling calm and clear and certain. "I can't give you the sister you remember. She doesn't exist anymore. She broke herself trying to be everything for everyone. And when she finally had nothing left, she stopped." "Is that why you changed? Because you broke?" "No," I said. "I changed because I realized I was allowed to." Silence on the line. Then, softly, "I'm sorry. For whatever I did, whatever I would have done, I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "Thank you." "Is it too late to fix things?" I thought about that, about the notes I'd hidden and protected. the boundaries I'd built and maintained, the life I'd created without her in it, about the sister I'd loved and the woman she'd become, and the space between who we were and who we could be. "It's not too late," I said finally. "But it's different now. I'm different, and I'm not going back to how things were." "What if I changed too?" "Then we'd both be different together. We could try that, see what happens." "I'd like that," she whispered. "Me too." We talked for an hour. Not about the past. I didn't tell her about the rebirth, about the death, about the timeline where she'd destroyed my notes and contributed to my collapse. That was my story to carry, my knowledge to hold. But we talked about the present, about her art and my research, about our parents and their limitations. It was about growing up in a house that taught us to compete instead of support. She apologised again before we hung up. I told her we'd take it slow, rebuild carefully, see if we could be sisters in a new way. And then I let her go. This girl who'd tried to break me and didn't know it, who'd lost me and didn't understand why, who was reaching for connection in the only way she knew how. I let her go and went back to my own life, the one I'd built from the ruins of my first chance, the one that belonged to me alone. My thesis defence was in April. I stood in front of the committee and presented 2 years of research with confidence that came from rest and preparation, from having time to actually understand my work instead of just survive it. I passed. Not just passed, excelled. They praised my methodology, my insights, my presentation. The department chair asked if I'd considered pursuing a doctorate. I had. I would. But first, I'd rest. My parents came to the ceremony. So did Emma. She'd driven 3 hours, brought flowers, sat in the front row with our parents, and actually cried when they hooded me. After, at the restaurant, my father raised his glass. "To Clara," he said, "who worked hard and succeeded." Worked hard. As if that was the secret. As if effort was all it took. As if I hadn't needed to die and be reborn to understand that working hard wasn't enough. That sometimes you needed to work smart, to work selfish, to work in ways that preserved yourself instead of proving yourself. But I raised my glass and smiled, and accepted the toast because they were trying, in their limited way, because they'd never understood what they'd done wrong, but they were here now, bearing witness to what I'd done right. Emma pulled me aside after dinner. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Thank you." "No, really, I'm proud, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. Sorry I couldn't see it before, how hard you were working, how much you were carrying." "You see it now," I said. "That's what matters." She hugged me, tight and genuine, and I hugged her back. Not the automatic embrace of my first life, not the duty-bound gesture of siblings raised to perform affection. This was real, tentative and careful and real. When I got home that night to my small apartment with my diploma on the wall, and my research published and my future wide open, I sat by the window and thought about the girl I'd been. The one who'd died on a retail floor between clothing racks and fluorescent lights, exhausted and heartbroken and used up. The one who'd given everything to people who'd valued her too little, who'd broken herself trying to matter in a family where only one person was allowed to shine. I thought about her with compassion, with gratitude, with the gentle acknowledgement of someone who'd survived what shouldn't have been survivable. And then I let her go. Let her rest in the darkness that had held her. Let her stay in that moment of ending that had somehow, impossibly, become beginning. I was different now. Whole in ways she'd never been. Strong in ways that had nothing to do with endurance and everything to do with choice. I'd learned to protect my work, my time, my energy. I'd learned to build boundaries and maintain them. To refuse roles that required my diminishment. To love people without lighting myself on fire to keep them warm. I'd learned in the simplest and most profound way that I mattered. Not because I proved it, not because I earned it, but because I existed. Because I decided I did. The city lights glowed beyond my window. Somewhere out there, Emma was driving home, probably thinking about our conversation, about the sister she'd lost and the sister she might gain. Somewhere, my parents were settling into their evening, probably relieved that I'd succeeded, probably not understanding what that success had cost in my first life or what it meant that I'd achieved it differently in my second. But here, in my quiet apartment with my earned degree and my protected future, I understood. I understood that rebirth wasn't about fixing the past. It was about refusing to repeat it, about taking the lessons learned through pain and using them to build something better, something that honoured the girl who'd broken by ensuring she'd never have to break again. I understood that revenge wasn't confrontation or cruelty. It was peace. It was succeeding without sacrificing yourself, shining without permission, building a life that required nothing from people who'd given you too little. I understood that the best closure wasn't making them understand what they'd done. It was understanding it myself, learning from it and moving forward with the kind of clarity that comes from having died and chosen to live differently. The acceptance letter was on my desk. Doctorate program, full funding, starting in the fall. I'd applied without telling anyone, accepted without asking permission, made the choice entirely for myself. Emma would probably be hurt that I hadn't mentioned it. My parents would probably say something about me doing my own thing again. They'd probably never fully understand why I needed distance, why I built walls, why I protected my work and my time and my energy like they were precious. But they didn't need to understand. I did, and I did. I carried my diploma to the wall, hung it next to my undergraduate degree, both of them proof not just of academic achievement, but of something deeper. Proof that I could survive what had killed me before. Proof that second chances were real, even if no one else would ever know I'd needed one. Proof that I'd learned the most important lesson any person can learn. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to matter, even when, especially when, no one else is making space for you to. I stepped back, looking at those two frames, those pieces of paper that represented so much more than education. They represented the death of who I'd been and the deliberate creation of who I'd become. The old Clara, the one who'd been destroyed and reborn, she would have sent a photo to Emma, to my parents, seeking validation for her achievement. She would have needed them to see it, to acknowledge it, to confirm that it mattered. But I didn't need that anymore. This was mine, my work, my achievement, my future. I didn't need their witness to make it real. I made tea and settled on my couch with a book, letting the evening settle around me like a comfortable silence. Tomorrow, I'd start planning for the doctorate program. Next week, I'd look at apartments closer to campus. Next month, I'd finalise my research proposal. But tonight, I just rested, enjoyed the quiet, felt the deep, bone-deep satisfaction of having survived what should have destroyed me, of having taken the fragments of a broken life and built something whole. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, I sat in my earned peace, my protected space, my chosen solitude. I didn't need the world to understand what I'd overcome. I didn't need my family to acknowledge what they had done or what I'd survived. I just needed to keep moving forward, to keep choosing myself, to keep building a life that honoured the girl who'd died by ensuring she'd never have to again. The tea was warm in my hands. The book was engaging. The night was quiet. And I was free. Free from the need to prove myself to people who'd never valued proof. Free from the obligation to sacrifice for those who'd never noticed the sacrifice. Free from the role I'd been assigned in a family that had never had space for who I actually was. I'd died once, broken and exhausted and used up. I'd been reborn with knowledge and clarity and quiet determination, and I'd rebuilt myself piece by careful piece into someone who couldn't be broken again. Not because I was harder, not because I was colder, but because I'd learnt the difference between strength that comes from endurance and strength that comes from boundaries, between surviving and actually living, between being the person others needed and being the person I needed. The woman I'd become wasn't better than the girl I'd been. She was just wiser, more careful, more intentional about where she directed her light and who she allowed to dim it. Emma would never know what she'd done in that other timeline. My parents would never understand what they'd taught me through their neglect, and I would never tell them because some knowledge was too heavy to share, some lessons too personal to translate. But I knew. I carried it, not as a burden, but as a gift. The gift of understanding that came too late to save my first life, but just in time to build my second. And that understanding had taught me the truest thing I'd ever learned. The best revenge isn't making them hurt. It's making yourself whole. The best justice isn't their recognition. It's your peace. The best victory isn't their regret. It's your freedom. I finished my tea, set down my book, looked around at the apartment I'd created, the life I'd built, the future I'd chosen, and I smiled, quiet and certain, because I'd learnt something else too. They'd tried to break me. They'd succeeded once. But I'd come back. And I'd come back unbreakable. Not because I was stronger than before, but because I'd learned that the strongest thing you can do isn't endure what breaks you. It's refuse to break at all.